Hello, I'm Irma Herrera, and I see the look on your faces. I get it. I meet people with names I've never heard before. Pleased to meet you. Can you help me with the pronunciation of your first name? Gitanjali? Did I get that close enough? When I meet Gitanjali Srikantaya, I'm sure I'm going to botch up her name. So when I introduce myself, I always repeat my name. It's Irma. Oh, I can't say that. Yes, you can. Irma, just try. I can't roll my R's. You don't need to roll your R's to say Irma. My father-in-law remembered the pronunciation of my name by thinking of earmuffs. It's fine if you want to call me Irma. Although Spanish has been spoken in this part of the world for the past 500 years, the way I say my name leads people to assume I'm a foreigner. Where are you from? I started telling people I'm from Denmark. Some years ago, I'm in Copenhagen riding on a city bus, and I look out the window and I see my name in huge letters. Turns out the oldest and largest grocery store chain in that country is named Irma. So I go to my namesake store and I push the little shopping cart, much smaller than they are here in the United States, and I fill it up with Irma products. I get Irma mustard, Irma ketchup, Irma capers, Irma hand soap. I ask my spouse to take my picture with the Irma label behind me, and I pack all my loot into a personalized Irma shopping bag. And it made me wonder, if people think I'm Danish, will they try harder to say my name? I'm not from Denmark. I was born and raised in Alice, Texas, population 18,000, 90 miles from the Mexican border, home of La Radiodifusora KOPY, Spanish music and news, from 6 a.m. to noon, at which time, da-da-da-da-da-da, the Star-Spangled Banner plays. And then, howdy! This is Radio KOPY, the best country western music in all of South Texas. Back at you in one itty-bitty minute. Don't touch that dial. Throughout my neighborhood, we are all crouched against the radio, looking for another station. In the 1950s and 60s, when I'm growing up in Alice, Texas, it is as segregated as Biloxi, Mississippi, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Only the difference is the separation is between Mexican Americans and whites. The whites, we call them Anglos, live on the nice part of town with paved sidewalks and air-conditioned homes, brick houses. We live on the other side of the railroad tracks in the bad neighborhoods. We have many names for white people. We call them Anglos, Bolillos, Gabachos, Gringos, Güeros. Our parents and grandparents called them Los Americanos. But mother, we're Americans too. Please don't call them that. Pues yo sé, hija. Now, the white people have a bunch of names for us too. They have a very rich vocabulary. Let's see, they call us Spics, Wetbacks, Mexicans, greasers, oh, and cucarachas. In high school, for many of us, it's the first time we are in the same classroom with white kids. Go back to Mexico. Someone will say on occasion, huh? Pinches pendejos? Our families have lived in this part of the country, the world, for generations. Some of us before it was the United States. We have nowhere to go back to. Let me tell you a little bit about the names we call white people. Anglos. Back in the early 1800s, Spain controlled the entire Southwest, and they lured white settlers from the Northeast and the South with land grants. Why did they want people to come to the Southwest? Well, they wanted the Indians to get the message loud and clear. They were never getting their land back. And in those land grant documents, they call them Anglos. And that name stuck. In Texas, white people are called Anglos. Even if you're Jewish or Irish, they'll call you an Anglo in South Texas. The next word is polillo. Did you know that France invaded Mexico and was there for 4 years? It's true, it was. And King Maximilian wasn't very popular, but one of the things he did do that the Mexican people loved is they introduced French breads to Mexico. And if you walk into a panaderia, that's a bakery in Mexico, or here in the Fruitvale or the Mission, you will see breads that you'll find in a bakery in France. You'll see croissants, you'll see millefeuilles, you'll see baguettes. In fact, growing up, we called baguettes pan francés. And you'll even see these little baguettes that are called bolillos. So a little French roll is a name for white people. I did not buy this in Denmark. I bought it at Safeway. And you know your people have arrived when all the things that you used to buy in specialty markets are now available at your major grocery stores. So then the word gabacho. Back in Spain, the French weren't that popular. And gabacho is the Catalan word for foreigner. So when French people came to Spain, they would say, oh, ahí están los gabachos. And the word gabacho stuck, and we use it to refer to any white person. Now, the word is often preceded by the all-purpose word enhancer, pinche, as in, ese pinche gabacho. Now, the word pinche is fabulously flexible. It can mean tight-fisted, stingy, codo. You go out with your friend for drinks and you say, how about you buy the next round of drinks? No seas pinche. It can also mean worthless, miserable, insignificant. These boots I'm wearing, love them. But when I bought them, these pinche botas gave me blisters. The word pinche is also like the F word. So say you bump into someone on a busy sidewalk and she looks at you and says, pinche idiota, I think you know what she's calling you. If you're not a native speaker of Spanish, don't use that word, okay? Because if you do, you might find yourself with a whole lot of pinche problems. So fair warning, okay? Now I want you to stop for a minute and think of all the ugliest words you know to refer to Asians, Jews, Muslims, black people. I already gave you a bunch for Mexicans. Don't need to go there right now. Just think about those for a minute. And now, switch gears and think of the ugliest words you know referring to white people. And then I want you to yell them out. Say a few things. Say it loud, say it proud.
Cracker.
Cracker.
Beckerwood.
Redneck.
Howley.
Okay.
Howley.
All right. Yes, it's a good selection. I think the ugliest name you can call a white person today is racist. Just ask Mel Gibson or Kramer from Seinfeld. The word racist, what does it really mean? Well, racism is a belief that one group is inherently superior to others, and that it's okay for that group to dehumanize and mistreat the other. It's at the root of slavery, colonization, apartheid, colonialism, and it's a pretty modern word. It was first used in 1902, according to NPR's Race Card Project that did the research for me, and I thank them very much. And it was used by a general, a retired military man who had had dominion over some Indian territories, and he was quite concerned that the American Indians were going to be extinct within 2 generations. By the late 1800s, many American Indians had been forced into reservations, very harsh conditions, starving, cold winters, diseases. And Mr. Richard Henry Pratt gave a speech because he wanted to raise awareness about the problems with Indians. And he said, segregating any class or race kills the progress of the segregated people. Association of races and classes is necessary to destroy racism. And that's the first recorded use of the word racism in 1902. Well, General Pratt had a solution. He proposed assimilating American Indians, and we were going to accomplish this by sending them to Indian boarding schools. Unfortunately, when these children get to these boarding schools, they're stripped of their given names. Their hair is cut short, contrary to their tribal customs. They're not allowed to speak their native languages. And it's a terrible experiment. A desire to solve the problem of racism ends up costing American Indians dearly, a price they still are paying. My own childhood is spent in a cauldron of racism and segregation. I don't make my first white friend until I'm in my 3rd year in college. I don't like white people growing up. Not at all. Would you look kindly upon people who view you as inferior? So in my 3rd year of college, I'm assigned to share a dorm room with Jody Wilson from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Who doesn't know an Anglo from a Chicano from anything? She's blonde and perky and open, and she doesn't think there's any differences between us. When she arrives in San Antonio, all of this is new for her. We share a 4-person suite with 2 other Mexican-American girls, and she thinks it is neat and groovy that we speak Spanish to each other. By contrast, in high school, if Anglo kids heard us speaking Spanish, they'd say, "This is America. Don't speak Mexican, okay?" So in that year we lived together, I learned that Jody and I have a lot in common, and this surprises me. We like the same music.
End of the spring, and here she comes back. Hi, 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 hi.
Summer day, we sing in our dorm. We daydream about the cute guys we want to go out on dates with. We study hard, most of the time. And we think about the kind of lives we want to have when we're real grown-ups. Jody demystifies white people for me. And she learned to say my name. The receptionist walks us from the fancy waiting area to the conference room. May I help you? Yes, I'm Irma Herrera, and this is my client, Mr. Juan Gonzalez. Mr. Anderson and the court reporter are having a good laugh when we arrive. When the deposition starts, all the parties state their name for the record. Irma Herrera, I-R-M-A, last name H-E-R-R-E-R-A, on behalf of Juan Gonzalez. A few minutes into the deposition, Mr. Anderson, I'd like to put on the record that I'm having a very hard time understanding Miss Herrera because of her heavy accent. It's a familiar feeling. By this time, I'm in my late 20s, and I know what's going on. In law school, I hear the grousing. My best friend, brother, sister, fraternity, brother, didn't get into law school or med school because they had to admit minorities. The Baki case is headline news. It's working its way through the courts. In fact, it goes to the Supreme Court my last year of law school. Oh, you're so lucky. A woman in a minority? You must have so many job offers. It's a pity I'm not disabled. My employer would win the trifecta. One day, after a federal income tax class, Jeremy asked if he can join me. I'm having a cup of coffee. Great job in class today, Irma. You're a credit to your people. Jeffrey, you're a debit to yours. I think it's really funny, and I start laughing. And Jeffrey joins me. He laughs also. He's a good-natured guy. See, I am an unapologetic affirmative action student. I'm the first in my family to graduate university, and I am navigating uncharted territory.
Amen.
As I sit in the deposition, I look around and everyone is waiting for my response. My sense of humor, the go-to place I usually find respite at, doesn't seem appropriate. Either people understand me or they don't. So I look at Mr. Anderson and I say, "Sir, please continue." Last summer, I was chatting with a group of women lawyers, young women, I think, they're in their 30s, and I said to them, tell me about your names. Did you change your last name or your spouse? Did he, she change last names? And what about your children? What names did you give them? And Carolyn, who has the hyphenated last name, said, oh my God, I've got to tell you this story. I'm in Alameda Superior Court, and this young lawyer walks in and says, goes up to the podium and says, Michael Cohen Williams, on behalf of the defendant, counsel, which is it, Cohen or Williams? Sir, Your Honor, it's Cohen Williams. It's a hyphenated last name. Not in my courtroom. Cohen or Williams. Carolyn tells me the courtroom is completely silent, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, is this guy gonna tell the judge that's his legal name on his birth certificate? We all know that if you piss off a judge, either you or your client, most likely both of you, will pay for it. So Carolyn then says, and all along, I thought the judge had a thing about women lawyers. And we decide he's got a thing about women. Because behind every hyphenated last name is an assertive woman. And it made me wonder, what would Mr. Anderson in the Yakima Valley, where I first started practicing law, and where I was the first Mexican-American woman to practice law representing migrant farm workers, I wonder what that guy, Mr. Anderson, and this judge in Alameda County think of the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Tani Cantil Sakaue, who does indeed have a hyphenated last name. She is the first person of Asian descent to serve as Chief Justice in this state. She's of Filipino ancestry, and she's only the second woman Chief Justice. We had one before, Rose Bird. Today, Chief Justice Cantil Sakaue presides over a 7-member court that has 4 women and 3 men. Before the Civil Rights Act was passed, and before programs like affirmative action that enabled me to become a lawyer were put in place, over 98% of the judges in this country were men, white men. So the court is very different. Now, next month, we get a Latino justice appointed to the California Supreme Court, at which time we will have 4 of the 7 justices being people of color. But let me give you a reality check. Most of the judiciary does not look like that. The California courts do, but most of the courts around the country don't look like that. Federal courts today, the federal judges, 81% are white, and 76% of all federal judges are men. And I imagine that the statistics for state courts are not that dissimilar. I trust these judges when they grapple with decisions like marriage equality, reproductive rights, the rights of disabled people, criminal justice matters. I may not agree with every decision that they issue, but I know that a diverse group like this really does have a much better understanding of what the constituents of California's lives are like. I put my trust in their hands as they grapple with these very, very challenging issues that Supreme Court justices have to make. All these changes, fantastic. I couldn't be more pleased. But are we living in a post-racial America? We have an African-American head of our country. And the answer is no, of course not. Because racism is deeply ingrained in us. It's not at a conscious level in us as individuals and in the institutions that support us and our society. And I see evidence of that racism all around me in the achievement gap when you look at how our kids are doing in the schools, in the criminal justice system, in the income inequality, and in the weekly killings of young men and boys of color. These are all indicia, if I may use a legal word, of how much further we've got to go. But I am hopeful because we once had a judiciary that was more than 98% white men. And so we have made and seen a lot of changes in the past 50 years since the Civil Rights Acts were enacted. So I remain hopeful that wearing a hoodie doesn't make you a target for the police. When Judge Cantil Sakaue was first appointed to the bench, several newspapers provided guidance, phonetic spelling of her name. One of them said, "Of course, you could always call her Madam Chief Justice," recognizing that she does have a complex and challenging name, at least one that's unfamiliar to most people. But I think a story I read in the legal press said it best. If you have an appearance before the California Supreme Court, you best learn to say her name.